America's borders define not only where our land begins, but also where a unique and often challenging legal process unfolds. Since 1920, the United States has expelled nearly 57 million people. This number surpasses the total legal immigrants allowed into the country over the same period. This power to expel, known as plenary power, grants the federal government near absolute authority over immigration matters. But beneath this broad authority lies a complex and deeply controversial system. It often operates outside the norms of traditional justice. Here is where it gets complicated. Unlike criminal proceedings, deportation is legally classified as an administrative, not a criminal action. This distinction, cemented by a Supreme Court ruling in 1893, strips individuals facing expulsion of many fundamental constitutional protections. These are protections typically afforded in a criminal court. We are talking about rights like the guarantee of a jury trial. Critics from a century ago right up to today call this a legal fiction. This label allows for a system largely unburdened by standard Anglo-American jurisprudence. Prominent legal minds once described banishment or deportation as a dreadful punishment. They said it was akin to exile, stripping individuals of all that makes life worthwhile. This sets the stage for many of the controversies that follow. For much of America's early history, the idea of an illegal alien was limited. It largely concerned those who broke qualitative rules like bans on polygamists or prostitutes, but everything changed with the Immigration Act of 1924. This landmark law imposed numerical limits on immigration for the first time. It effectively created an entirely new class of people who could be in the country illegally simply by their presence. Suddenly, a vast new population became subject to expulsion. This laid the groundwork for the mass campaigns that would define the decades to come. This complex system relies on three primary methods to remove individuals. First, there is formal deportation, now called removal, which involves a legal order and carries penalties for re-entry. However, this is actually the least common form of expulsion. The vast majority of removals happen through what is called voluntary departure. This administrative process allows authorities to coerce apprehended individuals into agreeing to leave the country without a formal hearing. Though labeled voluntary, officials note it is required and verified. It is simply cheaper and faster, turning a complex legal matter into a swift administrative transaction. The third method, self-deportation, occurs when migrants leave due to concerted fear campaigns, intimidation, and the enforcement of laws designed to make remaining impossible. Think of the infamous Truckee method from 1885, where economic boycotts and the constant threat of violence drove out Chinese residents. Or consider the Mexican repatriation during the Great Depression, which used raids and sensationalized media to scare many thousands of alien deportables into leaving. Operating this system is a vast federal bureaucracy that has grown significantly since its beginnings in 1891. It evolved from a small Treasury Department office to today's Department of Homeland Security, primarily led by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, and Customs and Border Protection, or CBP. This apparatus holds immense discretionary power. Low-level officials on the ground often act as judge and jury. They make unilateral decisions about who to target, what charges to bring, and what form of expulsion to use. Sometimes this is through the coercive use of voluntary departure. This prosecutorial discretion allows for choices about people's fates, often with limited oversight. The federal deportation machine does not operate in isolation. It relies heavily on a complex web of cooperation with state and local authorities, and increasingly with private entities. Programs like Secure Communities and 287G agreements deputize local law enforcement. They link local police databases directly to federal immigration databases. This can turn routine traffic stops or minor encounters into pathways to deportation. Adding another layer of complexity is the profit motive. Historically, private companies transported deportees. Today, the private prison industry, with corporations like CoreCivic and the Geo Group, operates the majority of immigration detention facilities. They spend millions lobbying for stricter enforcement. This creates a powerful incentive for continuous detention and expulsion. The consequences of this system are deeply personal. Individuals often face indefinite immigration detention, which many describe as demeaning, stressful, and dangerous. Unlike traditional jails, these facilities are sometimes called iceboxes due to freezing temperatures. They hold people not for a crime, but simply to ensure their eventual expulsion. The uncertainty alone creates extreme stress. For families, the impact is devastating: forced separation. Parents, many of whom are sole caregivers for United States citizen children, face deportation. This leaves millions of children behind. This creates a profound sense of loss and dislocation. It leaves individuals feeling like foreigners in their own homelands, struggling with cultural differences and language barriers. Men, for example, often experience a gendered shame because they feel they failed as breadwinners. Beyond the individual and family, mass deportation policies ripple through communities and economies. Studies show that removing millions of unauthorized workers could immediately reduce the United States' gross domestic product by 1.4%. Cumulative losses could reach trillions over a decade. Industries relying heavily on immigrant labor, like agriculture and construction, face severe workforce reductions. Meanwhile, in immigrant communities, the constant threat of raids and deportations fosters a climate of social control. Fear of apprehension makes people vulnerable to exploitation. They become less likely to report crimes or labor abuses. This breeds a deep distrust of law enforcement, pushing entire populations to live under the radar. This is where civil liberties groups like the American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU, often step in, born out of a tradition of defending even the most unpopular speech. The ACLU has historically championed due process for non-citizens. They often challenge what they see as overreaches of plenary power. A landmark 1992 settlement, resulting from a lawsuit against coerced voluntary departures, forced immigration authorities to inform all apprehended individuals of their legal rights. These include the right to a deportation hearing and counsel. While the ACLU itself has faced criticism for defending controversial groups, its stance remains clear. Constitutional rights must apply to everyone regardless of their popularity. This is so they can be preserved for anyone. So why are ICE actions and the entire immigration enforcement system so controversial? It boils down to this. There is a federal power rooted in absolute and unqualified authority. This power operates through an administrative process that denies traditional due process protections. It is carried out by agencies with immense discretion, all while intertwined with private profit motives. When combined with the profound human cost of family separation, the trauma of detention, and the economic and social damage to communities, it creates a fierce and ongoing debate. This debate is about fairness, human rights, and the very definition of justice within our borders.